Yeah. All right. Let's do it. Let's party, John. We're going to the other half. I'm bringing the flashlight. We're getting a full shoot of this place. Yes. It's absolutely incredible. Oh. Hey, what's up, Legion? My name is Sal, and this is the 100th ExLog. Today's episode formally kicks off the Phase 5 epoch of the Expedition Log series. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for helping to push my channel right up to the cusp of 50,000 subscriptions, which I do believe we should be hitting very shortly. It's been 4 years making videos for all of you, and for my 100th episode, I'd like to show you all a legendary dead mall that now sits abandoned and shuttered to the public. As always, I hope every one of you is doing well out there, keeping healthy and having a good time all the time. I'd also like to thank all of my patrons, elite explorers, and everyone that has supported me directly with donations throughout the past 4 years. The mall we're visiting in this episode began life as an open-air pavilion, and in the 80s it fell into the hands of Australian developer L.J. Hooker, who at the same time was developing the iconic Forest Fair Mall in Cincinnati. These two malls shared an identical aesthetic language until the Mills got a hold of Forest Fair. So today I'd like you all to come take a walk with me through the Richland Mall in Columbia, South Carolina, sister mall to Forest Fair, and a time capsule showcasing the now extinct vintage L.J. Hooker design. This episode will be a long one. It covers everything. It's got it all. Amazing abandoned mall footage, a story of corruption, greed, fraud, a man from Australia trying to build malls in the US, losing all of his money within 3 years. ExLog 100 lives up to the hype. So make sure you're subbed, make sure you're following the social media, grab a snack, grab a drink, and get ready for Richland Mall. But first, a word from a special sponsor that I've been waiting to share with all of you for about 2 years now. For your consideration, I present the Winnebago Man. Enjoy.
The Mini Winnie, part of American tradition, and today on the cutting edge of design and function in a Class C motor home. Do you believe any of that? Meet innovation. Money. I don't even know what I'm saying. We suppose we open... Gotta do it again, right now. The Winnebago Concepts and Engineering Departments They developed a multifunctional bathroom. Privacy, I don't know what the f I'm reading. I wonder what the f the real dialogue is. What the f is this thing? All of the windshield, for f sake. What the f did I say? And here, under the hood, we've stored something that'll really come in handy if it doesn't fall out and break my leg. Ah! Oh, f. Tony, do me a favor, will you please? Will you do me a kindness? Yeah.
I think I'm going to be walking in and out if you're going to park up and I got to come back.
I don't make any difference to me at this juncture. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Tony. Don't slam the fucking door. No more. Now listen, I've got to give a clue here now. I don't want any more bullshit any time during the day from anyone. That includes me. Want anybody yelling. We get anybody yelling around here anymore today, and then the shit is going to hit the fan. And they fit the needs of a very diverse buyer segment. Why can't I remember? I wrote this stuff. Why can't I remember it? What does the damn line say, Tony? What is the line? I don't give a shit what the line is. I f***ed up the word rear. What the fuck was that? We got flies all over the fucking place. Son of a bitch. Get out of here, you fucking flies. There's a fly over the headlight, Tony. We got flies coming for us. Get out of here, you flies. We got 3 flies, 5 flies. Make sure we don't have any flies here. Here we go. Get out of here, you damn jackass. God, I can't fucking make my mind work. Tony, give me a towel for just a minute, please. I'm blinded by that fucking hot light. Son of a bitch. What do you mean, I'm gonna fall off the fucking thing? Just keep running. Bullshit. I'm gonna slate this fucker. All right, I haven't got time to mark this fucker. Here we go again. We can't hear anybody. Nobody can talk to anybody. Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch. Can't remember the line. The accoutrement that you will need. Accoutrement? What is that? I don't know. It's just all gone. I get so diuretic when I sit here, and my mouth just never stops.
Is going to be very helpful in keeping you from falling down, you big dumb son of a...
If I knew what the rest of the line was, then I would be in good shape. Amazing how I just babble. My body is dismembered from my mind completely. I can't think. Something is wrong with me. You'd think I was making this up as I was going along. I was going bananas. Not even funny anymore. Let us get the f*** out of here.
The Richland Mall first opened in 1961 as a 210,000 square foot open-air shopping center, which at the time was the largest in South Carolina. Serving as anchors for the mall were a Winn-Dixie grocery store and J.B. White's department store right at the heart of the complex. There were 21 stores in operation at grand opening, and the local community absolutely loved this mall. Throughout the year, events would be offered for guests to take in as they shopped. There were magic shows, tap dancing shows, they had what looked like a counterfeit Big Bird from Sesame Street, and an Easter bunny in a skirt wearing ice skates in warm weather. Santa Claus would even show up wearing what looked like a Moroccan fez, accompanied by Mrs. Claus in a skirt, helping him into his makeshift VW Beetle sleigh. The mall was a huge hit, but the history goes so much deeper. So let's dive into the historical narrative for the Richland Mall in Columbia, South Carolina.
So I got to my hotel here in South Carolina at like 5 o'clock in the morning last night. Right now it's just after 10 in the morning. So we're gonna head over to the Richland Mall and see if we can get in. Let's do it. It's not working? There's stairs?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
You looking for the barber shop?
Yeah.
It's over here.
Yeah, I know it's up there.
Yeah, right. I guess the downstairs entrance is closed.
No, you can't. Well, I don't know. It used to be.
Let's see. As you can tell, I really need a haircut.
Yeah. Yeah, yours is not on the side.
Oh, here you go, right here.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Richland Mall. As I stated in the prelude, the history for this incredible place goes way deeper than its humble open-air roots. So let's go all the way back to the beginning.
They old Bobby's.
Thanks, man.
I used to go to them when they were over there on the corner printing.
Oh, they used to be over there?
Yeah. They printed plastic.
From Baltimore, I'm just visiting. But I'm here literally to get a haircut.
On Wednesday, June 15, 1960, an article was printed in South Carolina's The State newspaper detailing a new shopping mall that was set to begin construction imminently.
You go first. I'll be in later. Sure thing.
Architectural firm K.S. Espedal of Columbia already had the mall designed and on paper, which showcased a fully air-conditioned and enclosed mall with a J.B. White's department store at one end and a long concourse with junior anchors such as F.W. Woolworth's and Colonial stores. A Winn-Dixie and Eckerd's Drugs would be at the front end of the mall, which was estimated to cost over $5 million by its scheduled completion date of August 1, 1961. The Evans family of Columbia was behind this project, and the mall was to be named the Evans Shopping Center. While the Evans Shopping Center seemingly had what looked to be a perfect origin story, with everything in place and publicly announced, by Tuesday, October 4, 1960, news broke in the Columbia Record newspaper that the same shopping center was to begin construction with the same timeline, with the same anchors and retaining the talents of the same architectural firm. But now, the project would only cost $2.75 million, down from its previous $5 million price tag. A second architectural firm was brought onto the project, with Toombs, Amizano, and Wells of Atlanta joining in. The new owner was the Liberty Life Insurance Company out of Greenville, South Carolina, who bought the property from the Evans family and would continue with the plans to build their vision of this shopping center, albeit a bit tweaked. So, with the same stores signed on to lease, a team of architects, including the originals that drew up plans for Evans Shopping Center, and a new owner that was able to chop the cost for the project in half, what gives? What changed? Well, the new plan was to scrap the enclosed and fully air-conditioned mall in lieu of a new model that had its main concourse exposed to the elements, albeit with extended canopies to give shoppers a bit of relief. The new developers took the cheap way out, which would have the added benefit of expediting construction. On Sunday, January 8, 1961, the state newspaper published an article announcing that work would begin on the new shopping center at the corner of Beltline and Forest Drive in Columbia, South Carolina the following day. The article goes on to detail the cost to have shrunken yet again by nearly $1 million after the locally based McCrory Company won the bid for the contract of becoming the general contractor. Their bid came in at $2.1 million, with two other companies bidding against them. And so, with everything in place, work commenced on the shopping center on Monday, January 9, 1961. There were a few difficulties to overcome during construction, including part of the land itself, which was a swamp. This area had to be dredged out and replaced with red sand clay, which much of the development would reside on. Under two of the largest structures, giant creosote-treated timber piles would have to be driven deep into the ground, much like the poles used beneath docks, beach houses, and other structures in low-lying areas. Nearby, there was a mineral springs resort that existed generations ago before the shopping center was under construction, and the springs that were flowing out of the hillside near a beltline required 3,000 feet of new underground drainage. The hill itself was actually known as Quinine Hill because countrymen would often travel there during the summer to escape malaria, and wild quinine would grow in abundance around this place, which had tons of uses as an herbal remedy. Construction would take just under 1 year to complete, and on Thursday, November 9, 1961, the Richland Mall, simply named after the county in which it resides, would have its grand opening and ribbon-cutting dedication ceremony. The stores announced in local newspapers hadn't changed, and serving as senior anchor to the open-air mall was a J.B. White's department store, along with junior anchors Winn-Dixie, F.W. Woolworth's, Colonial Stores, and an Eckerd's Drug. Over a dozen mid-concourse tenants were open, with the majority of them being branches of Columbia's oldest institutions at the time.
I guess that's how I'm getting downstairs. Godspeed. Oh, I'm sure they did.
The pedestrian walkways were paved like the Riviera, with concrete and tiny pebbles. Overhead, there were impressive arches of white-painted concrete to break up the perspective of the 600-foot-long and 40-foot-wide concourse. Canopies hung on each side of the concourse to protect shoppers from the elements, and the walkways were lined with planters, seating areas, and small ponds. It was a lavish, clean-looking garden terrace with trees and fountains and alcoves and rest areas to create an incredibly relaxed shopping atmosphere. Throughout the 60s and 70s, Richland Mall would continue to thrive, as much as an open-air concept could, as newer enclosed malls would begin opening throughout the country. In Columbia, South Carolina specifically, 2 new malls would threaten Richland in the 70s. The Kane Company would open the Dutch Square Mall in 1970, and Jacobs would open the Columbia Mall in 1977. Around this time, in most markets throughout the US, open-air malls were becoming obsolete, as developers began aggressively expanding their efforts to build increasingly larger enclosed malls. Into the 1980s, the Richland Mall was sold to the Columbia, South Carolina-based Keenan Company in 1983 for $5.73 million. The following year, Keenan committed $1.25 million to renovate the then 26-year-old mall, which included the addition of a formal roof over the main concourse, new tile paving on the walkway, extensive landscaping, and the addition of some rather lush fountains. Completed in 1985, the renovations were a disaster. When it rained, water would stream into the mall, and drainage wasn't installed properly, so there would be flooding all over the place. The new lighting was also terrible, and the mall seemed even darker and dingier than before. Richland Mall was tanking. The tenants were upset, and with huge new malls being constructed right in the same town, change needed to come to Richland fast. The answer to Richland Mall's growing obsolescence would come from down under, and was gathering resources and momentum into the late 1970s for their debut in the United States. The Australian-based L.J. Hooker, founded 1928 in New South Wales, worked for decades building up their real estate business. Then in 1976, company founder Sir Leslie Joseph Hooker died after a very long career, leaving his namesake on over 400 franchised real estate outlets. 10 years later, the Hooker Group was purchased by one of the richest men in Australia at the time. George Hareskew bought L.J. Hooker in January 1986 for $450 million USD. Today, that would have cost him about $1.14 billion. 2 months after this acquisition, Hareskew was starving to expand Hooker's U.S. retail footprint, so he hopped on a jet and headed to Atlanta, Georgia, where the L.J. Hooker United States headquarters was located. He was met by a half a dozen Hooker executives, all wearing giant lapel badges, each with a different campy slogan printed in bold colors, just meant to further kiss Hareskew's ass as the new CEO. Now, the Romanian-born Hareskew is one of Australia's greatest rags to riches stories, ultimately winding up back in rags and in prison. But Hareskew led an incredible life, earning hundreds of millions of dollars by the time he was 57. but he lost every penny in the span of just 3 years after he acquired LJ Hooker. And as much as I'd love to tell you this entire story right now, I'm actually going to save the topic for the part 3 video that I have coming out on Forest Fair Mall in Cincinnati. That'll be coming up soon in my series within the next few episodes or so. You don't want to miss that footage or the story, so please stay tuned, subscribe, ring the bell, and keep an eye on my social media. More news coming soon. So Hersky was wined and dined on this legendary trip to Atlanta, and it turned out that the executives had already been working on a deal with French-owned Hypershops Inc., who wanted Hooker to build out their gargantuan hypermarkets in a series of mega malls throughout the US. This idea really excited Hersky, and just 2 months after he returned back to Australia, he announced that 3 enormous malls would be built in the States. One in Cincinnati, Ohio, another in Denver, Colorado, and a third in Tampa, Florida. Each of these malls would span over 1.5 million square feet, and they would feature a 200,000 square foot hypermarket. As Hersky was building up the hype for his malls in the US, he was also trying to get funding to pay for all this. American banks just wouldn't lend him the money because there were no letters of intent from well-known department stores for these prospective malls. So Hersky decided to rely on the Australian banks, which in the 80s would pretty much fund anything, especially for a public figure like Hersky. So he took out loan after loan after loan and decided to force development through by purchasing department stores which he could use as anchors for his projects. He picked up 2 New York-based chains, Bonwit Teller and B. Altman & Company, the Alabama-based Parisian department store, and Texas-based Sakowitz. In today's money, these ultra-luxury chains would have cost Hersky about $1.1 billion. Oh yeah, that's a ripe one. Yeah. This may be the sketchiest elevator yet. And while only one of the 3 megamalls he proposed after the legendary Atlanta meeting would ultimately come to fruition, which would be the Forest Fair Mall in Cincinnati, Hersky was able to pick up a property in the South that came up on the market, where he could still stretch his development muscle. Richland Mall was failing under Keenan's ownership, and they made the decision to put the mall up on the market, which immediately caught the attention of Hersky and the Hooker Group, who bought the Richland Mall for $9.9 million on Christmas Eve in 1986. They immediately announced plans to completely redevelop the property into an ultra-high-end shopping destination, demolishing everything but the J.B. Whites. By February of 1988, construction formally began on the redevelopment efforts. In a weird promotional event, novelty construction hats were being given out for free at J.B. White's as a way of saying sorry about the construction. The Phase 1 dedication and grand opening for the brand new 2-floor Richland Fashion Mall featured a ribbon-cutting ceremony on Tuesday, October 18, 1988. Just the East Wing opened for Phase 1 with senior anchor Bonwit Teller, along with the J.B. Whites directly in the center of the mall, which was still undergoing some light renovations. The West Wing of the mall was opened as part of its second and final phase grand opening, with senior anchor Parisian opening on Wednesday, November 15, 1989, bringing LJ Hooker's $140 million Richland Fashion Mall to fruition. But one day after opening the Parisian, Hooker announced that they were looking to sell the mall, and revealed that they'd been battling bankruptcy for 3 months prior to the Phase 2 grand opening. So at this point in the video, we've spent time walking around the East Wing, and when I showed up to film this place, the West Parisian Wing had been shuttered and you couldn't get in. However, I did make stringent efforts to get over there, which were successful. This involved befriending John the barber in his super conservative barbershop by letting him cut my hair during the height of COVID so he could introduce me to the security guard who I had asked John to vouch for me in front of, so I can kindly ask the security guard to escort me over to the Parisian Wing so I could film. Here's how all that went down. We'll get back to the George Hersky and LJ Hooker dumpster fire once we get over to the Parisian Wing. But first, I need to infiltrate John's conservative barbershop. Once again, this was at the height of COVID back in 2020. All right.
time. It's time I'm getting looks from the security guard. And I need to have actual business here. So I'm gonna go see John. I just washed my hair at the hotel before I got here to save a little time. I have to get a haircut because I have to justify me being in this place. Oh man, it's not gonna be pretty. It's not at all.
Just to further set this bit up, the day before I got into Columbia, I called the barbershop to make an appointment. John the barber said they don't do appointments, and that he would only be there for a couple of hours in the morning, and that if I wanted to get a haircut, I needed to just show up and be there. So when I showed up, before I turned my camera on, the doors were all locked, and the barbershop was dark. I waited around for a bit, and finally, he did show up. When I approached, I saw Trump flags everywhere and Fox News playing on the TV, and we'll save that for another conversation, but I was set on getting over to the Parisian and getting my haircut to befriend this man so he could vouch for me in front of the security guard.
Just waiting my turn. I'll come in a sec. Wait until he's done. I was walking around. You got a nice barbershop, though. You planning on moving when the place closes?
I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that they tell me
I believe it.
They probably turn it to a civil administration thing. Housing.
Yeah.
Well, not that. County officers, city officers, maybe even Amazon send you those shipping for.
Mind if I take a couple pictures of the barbershop before I get a haircut?
Sure.
Memorialize you. I'm from Baltimore.
Okay. Yeah, you called yesterday.
Yeah, I did. You're John? Yeah, I'm Sal. Told you I'd come through. I told you that I hadn't had a haircut in like a year, man.
Yours almost as long as mine was 3 weeks ago.
John's barbershop was actually the only storefront that was open here, so it was really the only place I could explore the back areas of. So I wandered around the back since the gates were up and he let me back there, and there really wasn't much to see, and I was just killing time trying not to make eye contact with the other guys in there. They were all talking politics, and I really wasn't about to get in on that. Eventually, John finished up with the guy in front of me, and I made my way over to him. But keep in mind, this again was at the absolute height of the COVID pandemic. Vaccines weren't a thing yet, and I was traveling from Baltimore to New Orleans. Masks were required everywhere, and it was a really weird time. Getting my haircut at this particular establishment was pretty awkward for me, to say the least. But I had to get in there, and at least make an attempt to beguile my way over to the abandoned west wing of the Richland Mall.
Let's do it. Let's party, John. You got a couple more customers coming up?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure you're still here.
Oh yeah. This is walk-in business.
All right, cool.
All these guys are regular.
Is there any way to get over to see that other wing?
No.
At all?
No. I'll vouch for you. It just depends on, he might want to walk through with you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You can probably talk David into that.
Could you introduce me at some point?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll leave at 12 and I'll call him back. He'll be sitting there when
John, you're the coolest dude in the entire world.
Nuh-uh.
Looks good to me.
Yeah, I was going for the old Bob Seger after he cut his long hair off.
Sure, looks good to me.
It was one of the worst haircuts that I've ever gotten. But my ruse would work. John said he would introduce me to the security guard and vouch for me, and so we'll meet up with him again shortly. In the meantime, while I was waiting for the security guard to arrive, I was finally able to relax a bit, knowing that I'd probably be able to get into the Parisian wing, and that I wasn't about to get kicked out of this place. At this point, I really started to get comfortable filming, and without having to look over my shoulder constantly the entire time, I could really start to see the decay and disrepair that this mall had fallen into. As I made my way up this busted escalator, I would get my first look at the rooftop, where things really started to show massive signs of vandalism and neglect, which we'll see in just a little bit. We'll take a tour outside there. But when I got up here, I saw the striking placement of the air conditioning pipes, which really caught my eye. This is a pretty bold design choice, and it really spoke to me about the kind of person George Hareskew was while in charge of LJ Hooker. He really imprinted his personality on this mall in a huge way, and I can tell that he had his hands on the steering wheel at every point of the process in building this place. I don't know. I won't get into the spider thing again, but for real, why do I seem to find spiders in so many dead and abandoned malls? I know they're all over the place, but how come I find them so often? There's something up with that, and I'm not necessarily okay with it, but that's all I'm going to say about the spider thing. Right when I started spacing out, looking at these awesome pink AC pipes, completely mesmerized, I heard some rustling down in John's barbershop, and I figured the security guard was probably there. So I made my way down there to meet him, kind of nervous, and hopefully able to convince him to let me over to the Parisian wing.
Hey, David.
David, this is Sal. Sal, this is David. This is our security guy.
Hey, David. Where you going, Laura? Where you going? Hey, can I talk to you for a sec?
Hey, I'll bounce on you.
But you don't understand, like, this place is gonna close. And I wanna see it.
Right.
And I wanna take a couple pictures of it.
Okay.
Now,
You gotta go out and go back in.
is that, okay, we can do that? Thank you, dude.
See you, Sal.
Hey, see you. Thanks for the haircut, dude.
Go down there, run down there, and you can drive your car up here to the second level.
You want me to come up here?
Yeah, come up to the second level and go on to the other side.
I'll go all the way down.
Over to the
All
other
right.
side. Crosswalk. Well, yeah, just meet me down.
I'm gonna go straight down that end. I got a red Explorer.
Over here, you see a ramp just like this right here.
All right.
I'll beat you down there.
Thanks, dude. All right. We're going to the other half. I'm bringing the flashlight. We're getting a full shoot of this place. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Let's do this. For those of you that have been following my series for some time now, you'll probably know that I've had some run-ins with some pretty awful security guards. Kyle, or whatever his name was, at Indiana Mall, the guy at Gwinnett Place, there's been tons of them. But this guy at Richland Mall was a true gentleman. This guy absolutely rocks. The security guard told me that it would be a little while before he could take me into the other half of the mall, so I told him that I'd meet him over there in just a little bit. But I took the opportunity to explore this roof portion of the mall. The damage to the entrances was pretty extreme, but more than anything, the entire rooftop area reeked of mold. The smell of mold was emanating from every hole and crack in each of these entrances, and it was pretty severe. The entire place just looked like a rundown shantytown, and you could tell that security and the owners were playing catch-up with vandals and people breaking in with the boards that they had to keep putting up over the doors and windows. There were a few places where I definitely could have entered the anchor space, but I didn't want to test my luck now with the security guard being so kind to me and taking me over to the abandoned wing. But luckily, my good buddy Anthony E. hooked me up with some footage of the black mold-infested Dillards. Check this out. The smell of mold coming out of that one little hole, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Oh. I talked with Ace about his trip into this Dillard's, and he was telling me just how disgusting it was in there. Even while I was walking around the rooftop, like I just told you, the smell of mold was super intense. And I can imagine that not only would it overwhelm somebody inside the anchor, but the heat must have been pretty oppressive too.
The anchor spaces that shutter tend to only keep their air conditioning running if they plan to either sell the property or if they have merchandise or fixtures that they still intend to sell. But here at the Dillards, with tons of leaks everywhere and with the glass atrium entrances acting like magnifying glasses, only give the mold spores what they want. This, coupled with porous surfaces like carpet and particle board, only make things worse. Recently, I was in an abandoned mall in New Jersey, where I had access to every bit of the place to film. But I had a respirator with me on the advice of my contact that got me into this mall, which I don't normally bring. The place I just filmed in New Jersey looked just like this Dillard's, possibly worse, and I really hope that Ace had a respirator on. If any of you plan to go out exploring, please bring something to protect you against the mold and nasty junk floating around the air in these places. At the very least, you can definitely catch a sinus infection or a respiratory infection, but there's definitely worse things that can happen to you in here.
Like, my hand felt hot inside there. The temperature difference is incredible. This whole place up here is like a shanty town. Ah, this is crazy. This is crazy. The smell of mold is so overwhelming around the entire place. I'm low-key glad that I can't get in here because it really is just a putrid, decrepit mess of mold.
It's not often that you see a rooftop parking lot that rests on top of the mall itself. You'll see a lot of garages that exist around the facility, but I was curious why this existed, and it occurred to me that this whole rooftop exists because the mall was built on a pretty small plot of land. And George Hareskew expected way more traffic than the mall actually saw, so he not only built a 4-story garage directly in front of the mall, but had the structure for the mall engineered to allow for parking on the roof, which is why there's glass atrium entrances littered throughout the place, and paint marking off parking spots. This was one of the more unique things that I've seen at dead malls in my time. When I filmed this mall, I was on my way down to New Orleans to pick up my mom and dogs to bring back up to Baltimore while my dad was away on business. But this was also at the absolute height of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is when everything started closing, including businesses like movie theaters. So when I was out filming, I saw tons of posters for films that were about to release, but never got the chance to because of the pandemic. But I've recently learned that this movie theater is actually open again, today, in December of 2021. The neon inside this place is super, super rad, and if you're in the area, you definitely need to go see a movie there if you're feeling up to it. We've had some pictures shared on the Discord recently of this cinema while it's reopened, and again, the neon, it really is fantastic, so make sure to check this place out if you're local. The movie theater just closed, so there should be some pretty recent movies up on the poster. Oh yeah, Tenet. I don't know what that is. Really want to see the New Mutants. But damn, I really wanted to see Tenet. Against the current circumstances. We're just about to finish up the walk around Richland's roof at this point, with just a couple more shots of the garage area, and we're about to make our way over to the Parisian half. I figured I'd killed enough time and the security guard was ready. But I'd like you all to take note of the mall's aesthetic language on the exterior. If you remember all the way back to the initial 1961 opening, the developer chose to take a cheaper route in building the mall solely out of concrete to save almost $3 million. While the use of concrete on the Richland Fashion Mall is abundant and almost brutalist in some parts, the structure itself is incredibly intricate and further accentuates the massive personality and infallible ability George Hareskew exhibited to spare no expense. While this is made most notable on the interior, with the details in the lighting and the molding, it's definitely worth noting how extravagant this mall is compared to what it was when it first opened as an open-air pavilion, especially on the tiny plot of land that it was built on. George Hareskew used every inch of this parcel of land, and he really took advantage of each space to make something pretty extravagant and not too big of a footprint. I can only imagine that George Hareskew must have been slightly disappointed when he wasn't able to realize all three of his mega malls. With the Denver, Colorado Mall being scaled back to a smaller one-floor, 700,000 square foot Thornton Town Center, and the Tampa, Florida Mall being scrapped entirely, his two legacy malls, his masterpieces, were the Richland Fashion Mall here, which we're in right now in Columbia, South Carolina, and the 1.5 million square foot Forest Fair Mall in Cincinnati. At grand opening, both of these malls had a nearly identical aesthetic language, but that design remained hidden from the world inside this very abandoned L.J. Hooker legend, which was built under the forceful leadership of Mr. George Hareskew. But until I was able to see this in person, I hadn't realized just how awesome Forest Fair looked back in the day, and Richland Mall is that time capsule. It's the time machine to step back into Forest Fair Mall when it was first built in the late 1980s. While most rural malls in the 1980s would settle for a simple one-story design with recessed ceilings and fluorescent lighting, or maybe just some simple neon to give the mall at least an identity of some sorts, Mr. Hareskew wanted exacting details to prevail. Gold sconces capped the bold columns near the grand elevators, with a pleasant, subdued turquoise accenting the brass fixtures. A series of symmetrical square recessions line the ceilings, showcasing an arched ceiling design which illuminates the concourse, with each recession equipped with its very own individual incandescent bulb. While the design you're seeing right now was the same aesthetic language for the Forest Fair Mall before the Mills got to it, Richland Mall is obviously a bit different, and when it was first built by L.J. Hooker, it was shaped like a bat. The center body was the three-story J.B. White's, and each wing has the anchors as their claws on either end. You can see that behind the elevator there's a bunch of drywall, which is right next to us right now. But on either end of the courtyards, there used to be hallways that would bring you to the back end of the mall where you would find the awesome aviation-themed food court, also giving shoppers a way to get from one end of the mall to the other. When I say that the original food court was aviation-themed, it looked like an airplane hangar. It had this huge sloping skylight that went all the way from the entrance up to the top of the ceiling where the eateries were. And there was this white tile everywhere, and it was really a striking space. But again, they had to demolish that 30,000 square foot space in order to make room for a new call center. And in doing so, they moved the food court down to this dingy space, which you'll see. After the call center moved in, you could still traverse each wing by walking through the White's turned Belk later in life. However, that entrance has been closed for quite some time. But this uncomfortably close drywall, those used to be two other concourses that led to the back half of the mall with the food court. And now that's a call center, unfortunately. Both Forest Fair and Richland were completed around the same time, between 1988 and 89. However, it was the very fabrication of these malls that would tear down the foundation of the L.J. Hooker Corporation. After acquiring Bonwit Teller, B. Altman, Sakowitz, and Parisian, along with forcing through the construction of 2 new malls with obscure high-end luxury anchors in remote areas of the country, by March 31 of 1989, Mr. Hareskew had acquired a total of $1.8 billion in assets, but their liabilities came in at just over $1.77 billion, with that money owed to more than 42 banks across the globe. On Wednesday, July 26, 1989, the First National Bank of Chicago started foreclosure proceedings on Richland Fashion Mall, and exactly 1 year later, L.J. Hooker declared bankruptcy in July of 1990. In the process, they liquidated Bonwit Teller, and the Richland store was shuttered in August of 1990, leaving the mall down a senior anchor just 1 year after it fully opened. Hooker also sold off the Parisian chain, but the original owners for Parisian purchased it back, and the anchor spaces were unaffected, for now. It was at this point when the big Chicago bank took over the mortgage for the mall under their subsidiary MPH Holdings. It's worth noting that L.J. Hooker was bought out by Australian Suncorp Metway between 1989 and 1990, and the Hooker Group would go on to thrive in the Australian market over the next few decades, ultimately landing back in the Hooker family when Suncorp sold the company to Sir Leslie Joseph Hooker's grandson, Leslie Janusz Hooker, for $67 million in 2009. And again, the company would go on to thrive in the Australian markets once it was finally away from George Hareskew's orbit. And Mr. Hareskew would land in jail for various crimes. And again, I will get into all of those crimes and the crazy story about George Hareskew in the Forest Fair Mall Part 3 coming up soon on my series. But in the meantime, go ahead and check out Part 1 and 2. I'll put up tags for both of those videos right now. I found it fascinating, the dichotomy between the East and West Wing. Right here, this is the only spot that has some sort of decay, right in front of the Belk in the West Wing. And you'll notice that the ceiling is in much better condition here, whereas over in the East Wing, it's in much worse shape. There's holes in the ceiling, they have buckets everywhere, there's leaks in the roof, and the contrast between these two halves is pretty striking.
No kidding.
And it just shows which side has been closed off. You can really tell where the mall has been used up until the point that it closed for good. In the 90s, Hooker's main 2 US malls were already in a devastating position just a couple of years after they were built. Both Forest Fair and Richland were well below 50% occupancy, and shoppers just weren't fond of the obscure anchor mix. With Richland now in possession of the First National Bank of Chicago, things would only get worse. 2 years later, MPH Holdings would sell the Richland Fashion Mall to Jacksonville, Florida-based Bida International in the first week of December 1992 for a tawdry $47.7 million, much less than the price tag of $140 million just 3 years prior. 1 year later, the mall had a new leasing manager, Montgomery, Alabama-based Aronov Realty, who was able to swoon a relatively well-known retailer into the vacant Bonwit's space. On Wednesday, August 4, 1993, Dillard's completed an expansion of the old Bonwit's anchor parcel, eating into the mall concourse to have a grand opening and ribbon cutting. Even after the Dillard's opened, the mall was still suffering, with occupancy well below 40%. The movie theater changed hands a couple of years later when it became a Regal Cinemas in July of 1995, and showing in theaters at the time were movies like Apollo 13, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Judge Dredd, and Johnny Mnemonic. That was one hell of a year for the box office. In 1996, the mall's name dropped the fashion moniker, going back to simply Richland Mall, in an effort to let shoppers know that there was much more than just fashion to offer inside the mall. 1 year later, in February of 1997, it was reported that work was being done to completely redesign the front entrance and facade to the mall. On Thursday, November 13, 1997, a ribbon-cutting ceremony was held for the brand new facade at the Richland Mall, which featured a welcoming front-facing Barnes & Noble and a relocated and redesigned TGI Fridays restaurant. The entrance also had a new sign showcasing the mall's new name, and an array of new stores inside the mall, which went unchanged in looks from its original 1989 design. Aronov Realty was promoting a new leasing program called City Shops at Richland, which enticed local retailers that had never had a mall experience with attractive rent. These local shops boosted the occupancy of the mall well up over 60%, and the mall seemed to be doing pretty well at the time, or at least better than the garish days of George Hareskew. 1 year after the renovations, J.B. White's was sold to Dillard's parent company, Mercantile Stores Co., in 1998 for $2.9 billion. Several Dillard's locations were sold that year to Belk, so each could strengthen their own stance regionally. One of these stores was at Richland, which was converted to a Belk shortly after the acquisition in September of 1998. A few years later, in May of 1999, Bell Atlantic, which would later become Verizon, announced plans to move a call center into the Richland Mall, which would see many of the inline tenants shift. By Wednesday, June 30, it was reported that work had begun on the redevelopment, which involved completely demolishing the back half of the mall to remove the awesome 30,000 square foot aviation-themed food court that had ample fenestration from the super rad angled skylight, along with its two rear-facing concourse arms that connected the two wings. Most of the eateries from the food court chose to relocate into the Parisian wing, where we are right now, to a new dimly lit portion underneath of the location of the call center where the new food court would be. The 132,000 square foot Bell Atlantic call center was opened by Friday, October 1, and the new food court opened a month later in mid-November. This redevelopment officially brought a rezoning effort to the mall, which was no longer just a mall, but was now a combination office retail destination called the Richland Mall and Center. Into the new millennium, a formal dedication ceremony was held for the Richland Mall and Center on January 20, 2000, with a ribbon cutting for the office and food court, along with a commemorative time capsule, which was buried right here in the Parisian wing, not to be opened until January 20, 2033. But you know, I don't think anyone's ever going to see that time capsule again, unless they're a demolition crew. But I'd love to be proven wrong. I really hope that the owners dig that thing up before this mall gets torn down. Raleigh-based Haywood Wichard bought the mall in December of 2002 for about $16 million, which was less than half of its assessed value at the time. Wichard, who owned about 35 malls at the time, was quoted saying, quote, "We haven't bought too many of these nice malls. Richland is probably the nicest mall we've bought," close quote. After an interviewer pushed back on him after the fact that his company was known for typically buying up malls that were already dead, Wichard went on to elaborate, quote, "We buy them from big companies that have given up on them. When they give up on them, there's not much we can do to save them. But Richland Mall, with its proximity to upscale Columbia neighborhoods, is a different case because it can be saved," close quote. So Wichard came in with a savior mindset which invigorated local businesses, but they were also real, unlike somebody like Kohan, who just buys these places and fakes it and sells it for a meager profit. As laudable as Wichard's ideals for the Richland Mall may have been, Wichard would fall victim to a local entrepreneur that would scam and fraud and ring in the death bell for Richland, despite at least the noble notion that Wichard had that he could save this mall. A third party would bring Richland down. On Saturday, February 1, 2003, it was announced that Dillard's was to close its location at the Richland Mall. And after a short liquidation, the Anchorage shuttered its space a few months later in spring, with the adjacent retailer Talbot's leaving shortly thereafter. Charlotte-based home design retailer Black Lion opened later that year in half of the Dillard space with a grand opening on Saturday, November 22. The store shuttered after less than a year in operation, liquidating its merchandise, selling most of it to a retailer named, quote, The Department Store, close quote, which opened in the Dillard space in fall of 2004, which itself would close in the summer of 2005. Then, in July of 2005, it was announced that the Richland Mall would be changing hands again, with the new owner set to become North Carolina-based Tony Porter, behind his holding company, Peerless Real Estate Services. This guy had huge plans to redevelop Richland Mall, and a public hearing was set later in the month where he entertained a packed room to discuss his ambitious plan to completely rebuild the Richland Mall area into a modern downtown, filled with condominiums, offices, restaurants, and retail outlets, which would cost him over $300 million to build. Peerless was so ruthless in efforts to promote his redevelopment that in their local office, his workers would be fined $1 every time they referred to Richland Mall as a mall rather than a, quote, village within a city, close quote. By August, the plans had gone quiet, but it was announced that Tony Porter's Peerless Realty had simply entered into a partnership with Wichard for the Richland Mall. 1 year later, in 2006, the mall was renamed to Midtown at Forest Acres, and the redevelopment plans began circulating yet again with the launch of midtownatforestacres.com.
Okay, that would have been the sketchiest elevator ride ever. But I can't. I did try, though.
Obviously, midtownatforestacres.com doesn't exist anymore, but you can all go check it out on the Wayback Machine, and I implore you all to do so, and to take a look at how it changes between January and February of 2008. You'll see that the redevelopment completely disappears, because the FBI found that Porter was a total scumbag and fraud, ultimately causing the Richland Mall owners to default on their $39 million loan in 2007, which put them all in foreclosure. There's tons more details on this guy, and if you want to get into it, just hit me up on the Discord, I'll tell you the story. Long story short, the FBI raided his home in an effort to try to recover almost $130 million that he frauded out of investors, and they were only able to find $18,000 in his account. So yeah, Tony Porter, total scumbag, and he put the death nail in Richland. The mall went up for auction after foreclosure proceedings in 2007, and the Sarasota, Florida-based Richland Joint Venture Group purchased the mall, with their winning bid, which came in at $11 million, totally short of the previous owner's $39 million of debt, but I guess that's their problem. The Sarasota investors actually had nothing to do with real estate, but rather they were just a group of normal people that wanted to try to flip the property for some sort of profit. Little did they know that there were other scumbags in the business that tried to do this, and it's really not that easy to do. 2 years after they bought the property and subsequently did absolutely nothing with it, it was decided amongst the group to put them all up on the market for almost 3 times what they paid. The Richland Joint Venture Brain Trust put the Richland Mall up for sale for $28.5 million in 2009. 1 year later, after the Florida crew received 0 serious offers, the Columbia-based Sentry Capital Group purchased the mall on Tuesday, February 16, 2010 for a measly $4.4 million. 2 months later, the owners brought in Alan Kahn to manage and lease the mall. Kahn was the developer of the 300-acre mixed-use Village at Sandhill, which was about 20 minutes north of the Richland Mall. And the Village at Sandhill served to take away most of the businesses from malls around this area. So their plan was to just get in bed with the enemy rather than trying to fight him, and I'm sure you can all guess how that plan will go. I'm not saying that Kahn sabotaged Richland, but I'm not saying that he did a ton to save it. If you were in Kahn's position, what would you do?
I'm gonna walk out ahead of you. You go, oh, we gotta go. Oh, that's right. Wanna go up this one?
Yeah,
A lot of idiots out there these days that are trying to break into these places.
yeah, one of them more.
They've done it before?
Yeah, they do all the time trying to get in there.
No, I'm not like that.
Over the next few years, a mix of local tenants would occupy the mall for short periods, most notably with the local sheriff's department being offered an 8,400 square foot space in the mall for a permanent location for their own CrossFit facility. The mall owners and management offered this space to the sheriff's department for 1 penny per year, with equipment being donated by Gold's Gym. In return, the sheriff's department would provide a heightened sense of safety in the mall. However, as the 2010s grew on, less tenants would occupy Richland, and by 2014, local newspapers reported that less than 30 stores were inside the mall. By 2019, only 3 stores remained, which is when things went to hell around the world. Once COVID hit, the mall, like most others, would shutter. But Richland would reopen its Dillard's wing after a few months, and the only business that was in operation at the time was John's barbershop. Belk had closed the gates between wings despite still being open from the front, and the Barnes & Noble, they were also open, but they closed their gate into the mall. The Parisian half would remain abandoned except for the sheriff's department, who could now enjoy the entire wing to themselves for just 1 penny per year. And it was at this point that I showed up on October 17, 2020 to film. If any of you are kind of scratching your heads trying to figure out who the people were that were walking around the mall, they weren't customers. Those were members of the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department is still here after all of these years. And the cops were giving me weird looks when they saw me walking around, but I did have the security guard walking with me who reassured the cops that I was clear to be in there. And I definitely would not recommend trying to get into this half of the mall. The gym is open 24/7, the cops have a key, and they know they're the only people that are supposed to be in there. And I get the appeal of urban exploration. After 100 episodes producing content on that very subject, I often find myself in pretty sketchy situations, but I do get it. I've been wanting to come here for so long, man. Oh my God. And I gotta tell you, I was so bummed out when I heard they closed. God, I was so bummed out. Yeah, I'm just gonna walk around. Thanks, man. Thanks, you too. But just imagine that if you did find a way into this mall, an open door or something, and then you got in and you found yourself in front of a bunch of cops that were getting their swole on, and you just broke into the place. That probably wouldn't go too well. So I don't recommend you try and get in here, and I recommend that if you're gonna go out exploring, do your research and see what you're getting into before you go. That dude rocks. So obviously the mall has nothing to eat inside. I haven't eaten yet today. So I went to Bojangles. Pork chop sandwich. Let's see. That's good. You guys do it right down here. But I'll take another bite. That's good. That's really good. For some reason, there was a misunderstanding, and they gave me a chicken sandwich too. I didn't order. But look at the mayo on this thing. Non-starter. Disgusting. Chicken sandwich was disqualified. That amount of mayo on anything. No. It's just a non-starter. Fries are super on point though. Chicken sandwich? No, I won't even try it with that kind of mayo. This pork chop slider? It's good. The pork chop slider was a 6-7. Fries are wonderfully seasoned with who the hell knows what kind of Cajun dusting. And the fries were a solid 8-2. Best I've had in a while. By this point, I'd gotten so much footage of the interior, but I had totally neglected what I heard was an incredibly fascinating part of the mall. Locals told me that the area underneath of the call center was in horrible disrepair, and that if I ever made it out to Richland, I had to go behind the mall and film it. I almost completely forgot to head back there because I was so excited with what I saw inside the mall, but I was able to get back there and film what I think is probably the gnarliest portion of the mall. I really couldn't believe how bad it was when I got back there. And I get that a lot of people are mostly interested in what happens inside of the mall because that's the place that you can get into. If you visit Richland today, I'm sure you could walk around here. And I always find it kind of funny when I see the viewers drop off when I leave and go outside the mall. But stick around, this is actually pretty cool. There's some really weird parts to this place, and it's actually pretty gruesome how badly this place is falling apart. I promise we will go back inside the Dillard's half before leaving, so stick with me and check this out. By the way, just for a point of reference, directly to the right of us is a neighborhood. So this place definitely is sandwiched between a main road and a neighborhood, not the most ideal location. And just to keep you calibrated so you know where you're at, right now, that is the call center behind the mall. We'll actually be directly underneath of the call center for the next few minutes. Exploring the Richland Mall and finally getting the chance to produce my episode on this place has really made me think about malls in general. There's so many that have closed in just the last few years. And with Richland's interior now fully inaccessible, and Forest Fair on death's doorstep, potentially closing at any moment, I can't believe it's still open, it makes you think about how the grand ideas of somebody like George Hareskew at L.J. Hooker could be lost to time forever. Such a meticulously designed mall, with the original aesthetic language still intact at Richland, which serves as the template for how Forest Fair used to look before its renovation, it's gone now. You can't get in to see it. If we don't get out there and document these amazing structures, they're going to vanish from memory forever. Sure, you can find some blurry shake weight cam photos and clips on Yelp and Google reviews and a couple of Flickr photos here and there. But now more than ever, it's crucial that we make efforts to fully document these places and tell their story. And that's the crusade. We have an entire cadre of people at DMOD that make really high quality content that get out there and film these places for you all. And it's important to show disgusting stuff like this. Now, with all that said, it's pretty important that you take precautions when going out to explore. I don't mean to go dad mode on you, but taking into account what I said about stumbling into an abandoned mall only to find the entire sheriff's department getting swole, you still have to be aware of your surroundings. Wear good shoes, or boots preferably, and always have a way to communicate if things go south. Most importantly though, you have to look ahead and foresee where things could possibly get ugly. Before I filmed down here, I made sure to walk through to look for anything loose in the ceiling or jagged on the floor that could kill me. And only after I swept the area, that's when I started filming. I get how fascinating stuff like this is, and back in 2017, when I was out on my first expeditions, of course I did some stupid things with zero experience. So don't be stupid like me in 2017. Be prepared, do your research, be safe, look ahead, get out there and explore. Take pictures so that the memory of these places can survive. And then come to DMOD and share them, or make a YouTube channel, or start an Instagram account. The point is, we need to preserve what once was for future generations. And that's been my mission statement since ExLog 1. Even a seemingly innocuous undercarriage to a call center can hold some amazingly unique and weird secrets, like stairs that look to lead nowhere that used to be an entrance to the mall, or the particle board ceiling that's destroyed, or dead snakes, or a little creek with some sick-looking water. I'm genuinely curious, actually, if any of you that are local to this mall have ever walked around back here. Did you know that this was behind the mall when you last visited? I'd love to hear about it down in my comment section, or any of my other social media platforms. I thought this section underneath the mall was just so strange, but it captivated me. And management must know that this area is in such bad shape, but it's still open for anyone to walk around in. It gave me big Sentry 3 vibes, but even Sentry 3 has tape up around the dangerous areas, unlike Richland. But if you're local, please let me know down in the comments what you think of this place, or if you knew that this area existed. One of the main reasons I think this mall failed, even disregarding the horrible asset management of George Hareskew, was the overt use of such a small plot of land that Richland was built on. The mall spans over 700,000 square feet, and it's sandwiched between a hill and a residential area. In its first iteration, as an open-air mall, it made sense to stuff it inside such a small space. But when it came time to redevelop this property, Hareskew seriously overestimated this property's potential and traffic that would be coming into the mall. And building such a massive 4-story garage directly in front of a mall probably took away from some of the organic growth that it could have seen. Sure, ads were taken out in newspapers and there were a few signs around town, but you really couldn't tell that there's a mall behind the garage when you're driving past it from either side. You catch a glimpse of a department store, but the garage structure was just too overbearing, and maybe they just should have put the garage behind the mall. This is coming from somebody who hunts malls down regularly to film all over the country. I've got an eye for this sort of thing, and while I've been trained to look for huge parking garages as a sign there might be a mall nearby, most of the population actually has a life, and they want to go shopping at malls, and they're not looking for stuff like this. So putting this giant garage directly in front of the mall probably wasn't the best choice if they wanted to drive traffic in, but I don't know, what do I know? Personally, I think this garage is super rad. But however garish this garage is, and however it has hidden or masked the mall from the traffic's perspective, the locals know this place exists. They've known this place exists for a long time. Out-of-towners aren't really the demographic that the mall management and owners were going for here. So while the garage might have played a part in diminishing some of the traffic that got to the mall, the main reason I think this place died is why most malls die. There were malls in competition nearby, and while George Hareskew put in $140 million to build this place, instead of just converting it from open air to an enclosed mall, he tore down the open air mall and rebuilt an entirely new mall in its place. But he brought in those obscure anchors that nobody really wanted anything to do with, just like he did at Forest Fair, which was a huge determining factor in why that mall died. Then you have to take into account his egress from this property. He left, and it was picked up by somebody else. They left, it was picked up by somebody else. And it was a string of management and ownership where either nothing was done or empty redevelopment promises were made. Concordantly, it was a string of greed. When you got to Hayward Wichard, who brought in Tony Porter and Peerless, that was pure greed. Tony Porter was just trading land like he was playing Monopoly, and he was taking cash from people with a promise of building something else in a string of fraud, which ultimately led to the owners, Wichard, to be foreclosed on. And it's things like this that bring malls down. It's not Amazon. Amazon had nothing to do with the demise of Richland. The mall itself was probably too ambitious for this plot of land, and a string of sales and foreclosures and auctions and mismanagement and those people from Florida that knew nothing about retail passing it on to somebody that was just going to be defrauded. It's things like that that kills malls. Do you guys see what I'm saying? It's not Amazon. Amazon just took advantage of the hole in the market. When I got back to the Dillard's wing of the mall, I was ready to leave. But I noticed that the door was open again, and I couldn't help myself but to go in and just get one last look of the mall before heading out. This was probably the only time I would ever have an opportunity to be in this area, unless I was going completely out of my way. I also noticed that there was a few women standing outside, smoking and just chatting, wearing those black cape things that you get at beauty salons during a haircut, but there was no beauty salon at the mall. I was happy the doors opened, but I'm pretty sure I was hallucinating. Or not. I could swear that I saw them in the door. Did any of you see the reflection of the women? Maybe I'm going crazy. Maybe I breathed in too much mold on the rooftop and I have like a contact high. I don't know. I'm going nuts. I think I'm just losing my mind. I'd also like to point out that there's been this noise going on in the background of this mall. I'm sure all of you heard these weird loud noises that sound like metal on metal throughout this entire video. That noise, right there, the one you just heard. I've convinced myself that the sound was the sound of cars driving around on the roof of the mall, where the Shantytown parking lot is. But I really don't have another explanation. It wasn't windy that day, there were no storms, and I couldn't find any moving parts to explain the noise, and it certainly wasn't the AC system, which was definitely off inside the mall. But then again, the only car that I saw driving around was the security guard in his pickup truck. And the guy wasn't doing timed laps around the place. So to be honest, I really have no clue what those sounds were. If any of you have an idea, let me know down in the comments.
Attention shoppers, there's no shoppers in this place. We don't have any shoppers no more. I guess it's just abandoned and so pretty and shiny with mold and water and garbage cans. Hi, everybody. Oh, it's me, Mona. I mean, your favorite friend, Mona. Mona, the PA lady. Oh, God, I miss you all so much. It's me, Mona. You remember me, Mona? Mona? Hi. Would you look at this place? It's so pretty with the ceiling holes and water all over the floor and buckets and garbage bags tied to the roof. Oh, and look, you're all here and I'm back. I miss you so much, buddy. I was locked up in that goddamn dungeon in Baltimore City for so long. Disgusting. It was so horrible. I was scared. I'm so happy to be back in a dead mall with you all. This place is so beautiful. Sal told me a while ago that we were coming here for the DMOD Summit as a sequel to Forest Fair so we could see what Forest Fair looked like
I really do appreciate all of you sticking with me over the last 4 years and helping me get right up there to the precipice of 50,000 subscribers. We're so close. So close, and I would appreciate it if you could just tell your friends and family and mail couriers and the meat guy at the deli counter and the next telemarketer that calls you, just tell them about my channel so we can grow this thing even faster. You spreading the word about my content is the best way to help me keep expanding. So if you're on Facebook, post links to my video. If you're on Reddit, post links to my video. If you're on Twitter, spam links about my content and tag me at Salvatore Amadeo, which is where you can find me on Instagram too. If you just want to chat with me, the easiest way to do it is by joining my Discord server, home of DMod. Just download the Discord app, set up your account, and then go to discord.gg/dmod to join. You'll have to answer 2 questions from a mod, but then you'll be able to see the entire server. I would really appreciate it if you all could help me spread the love and get my content out there for many more people to see, because there's so much more that I have to produce. So please, stay tuned, sub, ring the bell, and get the word out. Because let's face it, if you're still here with me after this long of an episode, after 4 years of content, 100 episodes, you may as well just sub and tell everybody else you know to sub to. I would really appreciate it. Once again, thank you all so much for many continued years of support. It means the world to me, and especially the continued support that my patrons and elite explorers have shown me. If you're still with me here right now at this point in the episode, consider yourself a solid member of the Quite Studios Legion of Explorers, for which you can get 2 special roles in the Discord. One for being in the Legion, and one for surviving all the way through ExLog 100. Links for all of my social media are down below, and in every one of my descriptions. I'll be back soon with ExLog 101 in a special for the holidays. But in the meantime, please stay safe out there, everyone. Take care of yourselves and have a fantastic day.
The Mini Winnie, part of American tradition, and today on the cutting edge of design and function in a Class C motor home. Do you believe any of that? Meet innovation. Money. Son of a bitch. Get out of here, you fucking flies. There's a fly over the headlight, Tony. We got flies coming for us. Get out of here, you flies. We got 3 flies, 5 flies. Make sure we don't have any flies here. Here we go. Get out of here, you damn jackass. God, I can't fucking make my mind work. Tony, give me a towel for just a minute, please. I'm blinded by that fucking hot light. Son of a bitch. What do you mean, one? I'm gonna fall off the fucking thing. Just keep running. Bullshit. I'm gonna slate this fucker. All right, I haven't got time to mark this fucker. Here we go again. We can't hear anybody. Nobody can talk to anybody. The accoutrement that you will need. Accoutrement? What is that? I don't know. It's just all gone. I get some diuretic when I sit here. My mouth just never stops.
Is going to be very helpful in keeping you from falling down, you big dumb son of a...
It's amazing how I just dabble. My body is dismembered from my mind completely. I can't think. Something is wrong with me. You'd think I was making this up as I was going along. I was going bananas. Not even funny anymore. Let us get the f*** out of here.